Aloha Commanders, and welcome to Later Tonight with Dr. Iron Chef, hosted on Aloha Diz.
Please be sure to follow on Twitch and subscribe on YouTube for all the latest content.
Today we're diving into the latest video on the official STFC YouTube channel.
Right, the captain's log with Domen, it popped up recently.
Yeah, Domen, he was on before, wasn't he? During the Q Continuum arc.
That's the one. Good memory. This time, though, the big focus was something called the Independent Archives.
Independent Archives. Okay, so what's the core idea there? Sounds important.
It really seems to be. Basically, it's their way of managing all the content loops that have built up in the game, trying to streamline things for players.
Ah, okay. Like tackling the sheer amount of stuff we have to do now.
Exactly. Especially older content, making it less overwhelming, maybe more accessible.
Gotcha. Domen seemed pretty enthusiastic in the video, didn't he?
Yeah.
Especially about the Wrath of Khan arc.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You could tell he was excited, even though he mentioned it got kind of, spoiled beforehand.
Right. But he did tease some candy coming before the arc starts. Always perks up the ears.
It does. But yeah, beyond the upcoming arc, he kept circling back to these independent archives. Seems like a major strategic thing for them.
So it's not just a quick fix then, like a one-and-done update.
No, not at all. He actually called it a living, breathing feature. Said there are consistent updates planned, even a roadmap.
A roadmap. Okay. That suggests a longer-term commitment. They're really planning this out.
Seems like it. Tackling that content bloat seriously, which, is a real issue in games like this.
Definitely. So what's first on the list for these archives? Did he give specifics?
He did. The immediate priorities are, first, the two Franklins, sort of consolidate that loop.
Okay, the Franklins. Makes sense. What else?
After that, they're looking at the Fangit Wars and the Fisher Loop. He mentioned they see those as kind of related.
Fangit and Fisher.
Yeah.
Interesting. And the timing.
The goal, he said, is to try and implement both of those during the Wrath of Khan arc. Though he added a little caveat,
Like what?
Well, the order might change depending on which one is easier or faster to actually implement on the back end. Practicalities.
Right, development realities. It's fair. It gives us a good idea of the next steps, though. A steady stream seems likely.
Yeah, rather than one huge drop, it sounds like smaller, more regular additions to the archives.
Okay, now you mentioned the back end. Domen actually talked about the work involved, didn't he?
He did, and this part was fascinating. Setting up the basic framework, like the tiers in the archive, apparently that's quick, like less than a day.
Less than a day.
Really?
Yeah, and this is the key part, consolidating all the stuff that goes into it, all the old bundles, rewards, linking it all up.
That's the time sink, I bet.
Huge time sink. He estimated maybe around 2 weeks of work per loop.
Wow, 2 weeks for just one loop. That's significant.
It is, and he was careful to say, that's not the only thing the designers are working on during that time, but it gives you a scale.
Definitely puts it in perspective. They're basically untangling and reweaving years of content. Exactly. Turning off old bundles, making sure players at different stages get the right archived version. It's complex stuff.
And it takes multiple people.
Usually 2 designers, he said. One doing the actual implementation, the coding side, and another handling the economy, the balancing, making sure it fits their design philosophy.
And that 2-week estimate, that doesn't include testing, right?
Nope. That's just the design and implementation part. Testing adds more time on top. So yeah, it's a process.
Given all that work, the positive feedback they got must have felt really good.
Oh, absolutely. Domen mentioned the initial launch was received, overwhelmingly positively. Some content creators apparently called it the best update in 2 years.
That's high praise.
It really is. And it wasn't just anecdotal. He said they checked internal data, too.
Oh, what did the data show?
It confirmed players were actually progressing through the archived loops faster, so the feature was doing what it was designed to do.
That's great. Data backing up the positive vibes must give them confidence moving forward.
For sure. It validates the whole approach, I think.
So, looking bigger picture, what's the ultimate goal here? The long-term vision for these archives?
Well, Domen laid out a pretty ambitious target. Ideally, he said they want to get all the loops implemented up to the end of 2024, archived by the end of 2025.
All of 2024's content archived by the end of next year. That's a lot.
It is. But it speaks to their overall strategy. The ultimate aim is for players to have like 4 or 5 active loops at any given time.
Only 4 or 5. How does that work with new content coming out.
That's where this loop in, loop out idea comes in. As they add new loops.
They archive older ones.
Exactly. The goal is to keep the total player time commitment relatively stable, preventing that feeling of just endless tasks piling up.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense for player retention. Prevents burnout.
Precisely. So how do they decide which loops get archived first?
Good question. What factors did he mention?
A few key things. Age is a big one, obviously. Older loops tend to be higher priority.
Makes sense. What else?
Player engagement. Loops that aren't getting much playtime are also candidates for archiving.
So, unpopular or neglected loops might go sooner.
Potentially. But here's a surprising one. Complexity. Or rather, lack of complexity.
How so?
He mentioned that some of the simpler loops, like Krytos, Defiant, Titan, they might actually be lower priority.
Lower. Why is that?
Because they don't take up a huge amount of player time anyway. Archiving them doesn't free up as much space in a player's schedule, so to speak.
Ah, I see. So the more time-consuming loops are actually more desirable targets for archiving.
That's the idea. Loops like Stella, and especially Meridian with its daily claims, are higher on their wish list because archiving them would have a bigger impact on reducing daily player load.
Meridian, yeah, that daily claim can be a chore.
Exactly. But he also suggested they might tackle some simpler ones first just to show progress, to get some quicker wins for the archive system itself.
A mix of strategies then. Makes sense. And player feedback. Does that influence the order?
Huge influence, apparently. He specifically brought up the Amalgam.
The ship. What about it?
He said it was the most requested ship in surveys and feedback for archiving, so they're actually bumping it up the list, implementing it sooner because of that demand.
Oh, that's fantastic. Proof that player voices are being heard.
Yeah, it's a really concrete example. Shows that filling out those surveys, participating in discussions, it actually makes a difference.
Definitely encouraging. So let's circle back to that loop in, loop out principle. Can we unpack that just a little more? Why is it so crucial?
Well, think about it from a sustainability perspective, both for the game and the players. If they just kept adding new loops indefinitely,
It would become completely unmanageable. You'd need hours every day just to keep up.
right, burnout would be inevitable. So the principle is about maintaining balance. When a new loop requiring, say, X amount of time investment is added.
They aim to archive an older loop that also required roughly X amount of time.
Exactly. So the overall time needed doesn't just constantly inflate. It keeps the game engaging without becoming a burdensome chore.
Okay, that's a really smart long-term approach. It also means we probably shouldn't expect, like, huge batches of archived content all at once, right? Not like the queue continuum event archive dump.
Probably not, no. He seemed to be setting expectations there. The pace will likely be more gradual, maybe 1 or 2 loops per major update cycle, depending on their complexity.
So steady progress rather than big bangs.
Yeah. The focus now seems to be building the foundation, getting the system of archiving running smoothly so that retiring loops just becomes a regular, predictable part of the game's rhythm.
Building for the future, essentially.
And a big part of that seems to be transparency.
How so?
Domen emphasized they want to keep players informed about their work on the archives. And he specifically asked for feedback, especially Year 7 feedback.
Asking for constructive feedback, not just complaints.
Right. Suggestions, ideas, what players want to see archived, how the system feels. They genuinely seem to want that input to guide the feature's development.
That's good to hear. Open communication is always appreciated.
Absolutely. It feels like they see this independent archives feature as a really core part of STFC's future health.
Well, it sounds like a really positive development, addressing a key player concern. Lots to look forward to there.
Definitely want to keep an eye on.
Okay, great stuff. Be sure to follow Dr. Iron Chef on Twitch and subscribe to Aloha Diz on YouTube.
Mahalo for joining us.